Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, buongiorno, buonasera, dzień dobry, dobry wieczór i как дела, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. Jay Slater case. Well, not really. Kind of tangential to the Jay Slater case, commenting on some commenters of the Jay Slater case and the recent uproar over the whole race thing. Let's call it Racegate. And that is namely to my mind, clearly and obviously with intent, racist post that was put up by one of the main cheerleaders and commenters of the accident group. That is Janey180. Started off being very much in the foul play group and then mystically, magically, for whatever reason, just decided all her previous opinions were wrong and this must have been an accident. Janey180, well, the update is the post is gone. It is no longer there. The albino monkey post, which to my mind is really just as racist because it is the same picture, that's still there. So it might have to be a second complaint to the YouTube legal team on its way. We'll see how this goes. Obvious question of the day, how is it that a so-called non-racist post has gone? I can think of two possibilities. Either YouTube removed it, or Smelliott removed it. Will we ever find out the truth? Well, you see, Smelliott's dad told her, honesty is the best policy. Yeah, honesty is the best policy. Always be honest. I would say if Smelliott was going to be honest, she'd tell us. YouTube removed it, or she decided to remove it. Option one, YouTube removed it. Well, that would be because people like me complained immediately and said, under Malicious Communications Act, hate speech laws, etc., in the UK, this is clearly a racist trope. It's well established as a racist trope. AI will tell you that. 101 other sources will tell you that. And therefore, it needs to be removed. I think I insisted the channel get removed, which hasn't happened yet. Well, that said, you never know. Fingers crossed, as always. But yeah, it's gone. It's gone. So either YouTube agreed and found it racist, or Smelliott decided to remove it because, well, why? If it's not racist, just keep it up there. Why would it be removed by Smelliott? Well, she is Janey180. Maybe she did a 180 on this as well. Maybe she looked at it, thought about it, and thought, yeah, of course it's racist. You know, when I look into my own evil heart, maybe Smelliott thought that yeah, I am, in fact, racist. Maybe she thought that. I don't know. I don't know. But it's gone. The albino one is still up there. So that's the update on that. Now, another update yesterday, I went and found the actual findings of the Scottish Solicitors Tribunal that featured Jane Elliott when she took on Glasgow lawyer Matt Burlow. Now, I think you all know the upshot of this. This was where Smelliott thought she could, parade and show off her legal training as the second complainer. Yeah, Scottish Law Society, but second complainer, backing them up. And it would seem to me the main force in all this, the driving force of all this, was, I believe, Jane Elliott. And she thought she'd get the better of Burlow. Didn't quite turn out that way. She had 4 main claims against Burlow. This isn't me speaking. You can read it in my community post. It's all there, the findings of the tribunal. She thought she could have 4 claims against Burlow. All 4 claims, all 4 were rejected. That's why I keep posting Burlow 4, Gobshite 0. That's just the result. Again, not me saying it, I'm just repeating what the Scottish Tribunal concluded. But they concluded a lot more than that. Not only did Gobshite lose 4-0, they also said Gobshite and her side, Scottish Law Society, had to pay the £30,000 costs. Bit of a blow, and that's why I speculated maybe she had to go back to work, because she was a retired dentist. Maybe she had to go back to work because the agreement was she had to pay the Scottish Law Society. I don't know what the arrangement was, but it seems to me she went back to work pretty darn soon after losing that case. Speculation, but makes sense. Prove me wrong. Anyway, in this post, we already have, this is where it links back to Racegate, we already have the evidence from the Scottish Tribunal. Again, it's not from me. These are not my words. This is the Scottish Solicitors Tribunal concluding that it is fair to describe Jane Elliott as anti-Semitic. Her posts, her language, everything she's put out there was examined, right? And the Scottish Tribunal concluded, yes, anti-Semitic. So she has a track record of being, in effect, racist. I know you can argue what the Jews, the Semites aren't exactly a race, but it does fall into the same category. It is bigotry. It is discrimination. It is, I would say, racist when you pick on one particular group, in this case, the Jews, and you say all kinds of nasty things about them because it seems they are Jews. That is anti-Semitic, and I do want to go and have a look, word for word, again, what the tribunal said, not me. So when you check out my community post, it's on page 2 of the post, and this is what the tribunal concluded. The secondary complainer, that would be Jane Elliott, Janey 180, the secondary complainer has previously made remarks on Facebook which are capable of being construed as anti-Semitic in terms of the IHRA definition, which is accepted and adopted by the UK and Scottish governments. In other words, in legal terms, and they've examined, of course they are, these are legal people, they've examined the exact agreed upon definition of anti-Semitism. Janey 180's comments, posts, descriptions fit that definition, and therefore legally we can say she is, and I'm going to say it, Jane Elliott is an anti-Semite. She is anti-Semitic. Now, given that track record, it makes perfect sense to me that her bigotry and her racism and her hate would not stop just at one group. Why would it? Why not expand that group to others you just don't like the look of? You just don't like their culture. You just don't like their whole being. So to me, it's perfectly logical that the next step would be Janey 180 would reveal herself to be a total racist. Of course she did. That's why she posted that racist trope of the monkey and connected it specifically to Jan. And here's the important point. If the monkey had been posted just randomly, with no reference to any person, with no reference to any individual, with no reference to any race, that's fine. Anyone can do that. I mean, PG Tips did it for a while, but even PG Tips, I think, eventually got in trouble because it just didn't seem totally above board. You've got to be careful with this. If you know anything about law, you would be hesitant. But that, of course, is not what Janey did. She started her whole post by knowing that the whole focus is on one individual. That happens to be blank. Well, Jan explained she's mixed race, but in appearance and culture is effectively black. So the target was there. That had been announced. That would have been trumpeted loud and wide by Janey. Here's my target. Her name is Jan. She's black. Right. Picture 2. Here's a chimp made to look like Jan. You can't get away with that. That's racist. Because it is focusing on the immutable characteristics of one individual and ridiculing it solely based on racial appearance. That's it. And I said in an earlier video, this is why there are certain boundaries. And I'm going to go into this video. This might be a long video. I might have to do 2 or 3 parts. But there are certain parts of racism where it is a grey area. You don't know the intent of the person. You really don't, because it comes from the heart. If it's a feeling, you really don't know what's at work, except in some extreme cases. And these extreme cases have been labeled, they've been broadcast, they've been announced. And the obvious one is using the N word. It is such a race-specific pejorative term, worse than that, that in any form, Western society has decided you just don't use it. There are just far too many people that will take it, rightfully so, as a racial slur. Don't use it. That's one example. The other example is this whole monkey, chimp, gorilla trope. As soon as you've put that image out there and you've connected it with an individual of the black race, that's it. That's it. You have declared yourself effectively racist. I remember one case in the United States where I think somewhat innocently, a commentator on an American football game described a new, I don't know, new player, I've forgotten his name, linebacker, and described him as like a marauding gorilla. Well, unfortunately, that linebacker was African American. He was black. And just the word marauding gorilla on the field of play, that was the end of that commentator's career. You just can't link those two things. The the ape, the gorilla, the monkey of the animal world, and a particular individual of the black race, or even the black race in general. You can't do it. That's another clearly stepped over the mark. Intent, as I say, that commentator I don't think had the intent of saying a racist thing, but he said it, and that's it. You've crossed the line, you have to go. That is how it works, whether you agree with it or not, in Western society these days. Now, I believe, just my belief, that Jane Elliott knows that. Of course she knows that, even though she grew up in whiter than white Sunderland for half her life. And the rest of it was up in Glasgow, which is even whiter. Even though she has, I think, very little everyday experience of actually dealing with a society that is multiracial, multicultural, she doesn't know how certain elements of race relations work. She just doesn't. She hasn't grown up with it. She doesn't live in that environment, from what I know. I'm nowhere near the level to what I've experienced. However, as a somewhat educated person, she must surely know about the N word and the whole monkey thing. She must know that she crossed that line. So my assumption is, of course she knew it. She did it deliberately because she also thought it was the form of hate and abuse that would most hurt Jan. Because I also think most people that have been following our channels know that Jan is very, very sensitive to this kind of thing. And Jan, in her reply, gave us some information about her background, which I didn't know about. But once you know some of Jan's background and where she's coming from, you would see that the kind of racial abuse that came in that post from Janey was just piling on the hurt, the hate, and the harm. And I think she knew it. She did it because she just didn't care. In other words, to me, the hate and the harm and the hurt that Janey could do with that post outweighed any disadvantage of putting it out there. Surely she knew. And then the bizarre thing was, as if putting out the racial post itself wasn't bad enough, she then dragged in someone else from work, a guy called Ben Grace, a work colleague. And she posted a message from 4 months ago saying, look, this is my work colleague. He's black and he says a nice thing about me in this message. That means I can't be racist. You just raise your eyebrows and go, oh my God, here we go again. I have a black friend, therefore I can't be racist. I have a Jewish friend, therefore I can't be anti-Semitic. Well, you do have a Jewish friend, but you are anti-Semitic. So how does that work? And I would say, yes, you probably do have a black friend, Mr. Ben Grace, but you're also a racist in your heart. Yeah. You might have gone to 101 anti-racism marches, but what is in your heart has not been affected or changed by any virtue signaling performance you've put out there, is my assessment. Smelliott. Let's turn to Jan's reply very quickly. Jan's reply was actually quite substantial. If you haven't seen it, go to Jan's views, see her reply, listen to her reply. I think it's a longish one, 30 minutes. Jan gets very into it. She actually does well on controlling her emotions because Jan does get emotional. And as Jan knows, as everyone knows, when you get emotional, you sometimes lose the plot of what your thinking is here. But Jan did an excellent response. I didn't totally agree with her. I never do. I'm somewhat adversarial with Jan on certain issues of race. Not all of them, but certain ones. But she made some substantial and salient points, again, going into her background and trying to explain how, to her, it's always very personal race, to her, she does see systemic racism. I don't happen to see it in the same way, but I've never had Jan's experience, so how can I say? How can I say what would be in her heart? Because I've never been through what she's been through. But similarly, she can, maybe that's why Jan isn't that keen to, converse with me on the subject because she's never been through what I've been through. It's a complicated thing, and Jan gets emotional. But she went through it very carefully. She explained where she's coming from. And here's another thought that I had. If there had been no protest to Jane Elliott's racist post of linking Jan with the chimp, if there'd been no protest, if there'd been mild protest and we'd all just said that's terrible, what would have been the next step? I'm not clear what the next step of hurt would have been for anti-Semitic Jane, racist Janey. What would have been the next step? Would we have been surprised if perhaps a picture of a gorilla, had been put out there with the words "ooh ooh ooh, I'm looking for bananas," and then next to that would be a picture of, I don't know, Jan's son or grandson. Can't remember if Jan has a son or grandson. Let's assume there's a male member in Jan's family. Would that have been Janey's next step? Because I can picture that if she gets away with the whole, here's Jan, here's a chimp that looks like Jan. Ha ha. Is the next step, here's a male in Jan's life, and here's a gorilla looking for bananas. Don't they look the same? Is that the next step? Makes you wonder. As DJ Raver said, it just when you think it can't get any lower, just when you think this accent group can't get any lower, it does get lower. And not only that, we have a few in the accent group that actually chimed in support of the racist, anti-Semitic Jane Elliott. Can you believe that? Thomas Wilson out there saying, well, I don't see any mention of race. I don't see the intent here. And my comment to that was, okay, so when you have a black footballer who gets the ball in a match, and the ignoramuses of the crowd start going ooh 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 ooh, making the monkey noise. Well, no one's mentioning race there, Thomas. So does that make it okay? Oh, it must be okay. No one mentioned race. Let's just, wait for the ball to go to a certain player and then make the monkey noise. No one's mentioned race, have they, Thomas? So that means their intent must be fine. Just, young lads making a few silly noises. I think this shows just how much in Seton Delaval, in Sunderland, and in Glasgow, the whole racist thing hasn't gone away. And that's what really, really disappoints me, because the area where I was going to disagree with Jan was I don't see in the UK, again, I'm not the one to speak because I don't know the UK that well, I don't go there enough. But from my reading and understanding, I would have said that amongst most people, the vast majority of people in the UK today, they wouldn't dream of doing certain things because they know it's unacceptable. End of. And my disappointment is that now I've been proven wrong about that. We have a retired dentist with some kind of legal training, God knows what, Smelliott, making the racist post. And we have the sage of Seton Delaval, Thomas Wilson, saying it's fine. I don't see the intent. This one's absolutely good to go. Keep posting those chimps and those apes, and let's post a picture next to it of a certain black individual. It's okay. No one's going to know the intent, says Thomas. It's fine. And those two there, they prove what I thought is absolutely wrong. That, sadly, there is this underlying racist attitude among certain white individuals. And I don't know, is it a northern thing? Maybe not, but maybe just coincidence that Sunderland, hometown of Jane Elliott, and the northeast, Newcastle area, Thomas Wilson, is that the last bastion of racial bias, insensitivity, and abuse? Fingers crossed it is, because we could probably stamp that out in good time. But my fear is if it's not just those two and it's nationwide, then what I thought had pretty much disappeared is bubbling around in the background, ready for a good laugh at the next post. That's very sad. That's where I've been taken aback. Let us talk about intent here, because it is difficult, this. Apart from those extreme areas, the N-word and the monkey trope and certain things, it is difficult to know. I mean, there are other examples. If you're trying to get into a nightclub and, you've got some black people here, some white people here, and, you've got the doorman saying, well, you're white, you can go in. You're white, you can go in. You're black, no, you have to wait. I mean, if the guy says that, that's another one. That's obvious. You've crossed the line. It's judging people purely and only. This is the key. Purely and only on their race, their skin color. That's it. That's racist. I mean, there might be other factors. This is where intent gets a bit blurred. If the guy doesn't let in a certain group of, let's say, black males, it might not be racist, might be because he knows they've caused trouble before. And this is the trap. An observer that doesn't know the context and doesn't know the background might say, well, hang on a second, he let in that group of white lads, and he didn't let in that group of black lads. That's racism. But it might not be because we don't know the full story. Without knowing the full story, you can't be 100% sure. And it goes back to, obviously, intent and what is in your heart. But again, there might be certain cases where you can be sure it is racism. But they're rare. They're rare. I want to talk about another example of this, where on the surface, the vast majority of people are going to shout out racist, racist, racist. But with a little knowledge and a little experience, you know that it isn't. But on the surface, it obviously is. And this came up in my Spanish class yesterday. Because when I was thinking about the whole race thing, I remembered back when a player from Manchester United a few years ago, I apologize now, I'm going to get some of the details wrong, but the outline of my story is right. Uruguayan guy, playing for Man United, Cavani, I think Cavani was his last name. Uruguayan, that's the important thing. And in one game, he came on as a sub, I believe, against Southampton, scored 2 late goals, and Man United won. So effectively, he was the hero of the game. He got a lot of praise. A lot of social media was bubbling about Cavani. What happened was, in one social media message to a friend of his, who happened to be maybe black or brown, he referred to this friend as mi negrito. Now, negrito means little blackie, little black thing. It's the best translation. It's an awful translation, but negro is black. Negrito, little black person, little black thing. And that, of course, didn't go well with the English FA because literally you just can't say, if it's translated, you can't go around posting little black thing, little black person. And Cavani was, I think in the end, he was fined, I don't know, a lot of money. Not a lot for a professional footballer, but, quite a few thousand. And I think banned for 3 games, something like that. Again, apologies if the details are wrong. But he was sanctioned by the English FA. The only problem is, that was an example of racism, what he said, my little black thing, only in the minds of those that don't understand the context. The context is the word negrito in many Spanish-speaking countries is not connected with race in any way, shape, or form, believe it or not. You will hear black people refer to other black people as negrito or negrita. Yeah, little black boy, little black girl, my little black thing. And it's a friendly term, it's a term of affection. I know, hard to believe, but there it is. Family member, you might call your own little child. Ven aquí, mi negrita. It's like my little princess, my little darling. And it's actually not connected with color. Yeah, white Latinos might call each other negrito or negrita. I know, on the surface it doesn't make sense, but that is the reality. In Cavani's case, the recipient of that message, his friend, backed him 100%. You've got it wrong, English FA. There's nothing racist here at all. It's just what we call each other. It's a friendly term. It's affectionate. It's nice. And it even went to the point where the Uruguayan language association that, can explain common and everyday terms to the rest of the world said, no, this is, it's not only just Uruguayan, the whole of the Latino world uses this. But in my discussion with my Spanish student yesterday, I got into this and I said, let's read an article from someone who is black and someone who went to Argentina and they went to Buenos Aires and they heard this term and they felt offended. They felt offended because, not really knowing the context and the background, they could hear that it referred to color. And if they were called it, they didn't like it. And actually, there are other articles out there by other people that don't like the term. Yes, they understand that it is a term of affection in the Latino world, but they still don't like it. And so the conclusion that we came to, the student and I in our discussion, was even when you have what is an acceptable word or term to the majority, to the vast majority, you're still likely to get a minority that will be very upset and offended by that same word. In other words, the person using the term can be totally innocent with pure intentions and not understand why it could cause offense. But another person hearing it might just feel awful about the same word. The intent is fine, but the effect on some, a small number maybe, is devastating. In that sense, is it racist? I would say no, but you could argue on the one hand no, but on the other hand yes. This is the most awful grey area. In sum, what I'm going to say is there are often times when it seems like the demand to find racism is far greater than the actual supply of racism out there. And this is a prime example. Those that want to look for and find and publish all about racism can find it wherever they want. It doesn't mean it's the actual case. What, for example, I've come across this in a few videos where you have predominantly black Americans that have come to Europe to live, whether it be Italy, Spain, or France. And I love watching their reactions to how they adopt and how they adapt, how they, manage their life in the new country here. Especially black Americans, because I think sometimes European culture is a very distant place for them. Not always, but often is. And often you hear this complaint that I felt that they were looking at me or they were behaving differently towards me because of my race. And then you look into the whole story. So what happened? What made you think that? And it could be something very simple. It could be simple. It could be, for example, black person goes into a bakery in France, a little small shop, and they're treated differently. They're treated a bit offhand. They're not treated with the same, respect or the same deference. And that black person might think, obviously, this is racism. But then I often ask the question, well, could it be for another reason? Could they have done something or not done something that made them seem rather rude? Often it is the case. Not always, but often is the case. If you go into a small French bakery and you don't say bonjour, you just go to the front and tell them what you want. I want that, that, that. If there's no bonjour and no, small talk, that is considered hideously discourteous and rude. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter what the colour of your skin is, you're not going to be treated very well. You might get the bread shoved in a bag and told the price and get out of here. Nothing to do with race, it's to do because you didn't know how to handle that social situation. But time after time and time again, I see this in videos. Oh, we were treated this way, we were treated that way. These people are terrible, these people are racist, these people are horrible, they're bigoted, they're not very tolerant. That might be the case, but it might be that you didn't do the right thing. And it's not because of you exactly that you're getting this, it's because of what you didn't do that you should have learned to do. Intent. It's not easy to figure out every time what is going on in the background. I just want to finish by turning to the comment that Janey mentioned. Excuse me a second. That Janey mentioned, because bizarrely, she seems to have defended what she did with the racist post by pointing to something she claims I said was also racist. Now, I mentioned this before, this is an odd defense. It's like saying, don't look at what I did, look at what he did, and he did something that is the same or worse. Okay, let's for the sake of argument assume that's true. Because Janey was always going on about, well, why doesn't Jan call Duncan out for what he says that seems to be racist? I've got a simple answer for that. I mean, Jan's answer was maybe she does. Maybe in private emails or private communication, Jan does say, I don't like the way you said that, Duncan. And I'll say, oh, God, I didn't realize it went down that badly. So, first of all, Janey has no idea what Jan says to me or what I say to Jan. End of. So, this whole assumption, why don't you call him out? Well, I guess the question is, why don't you call Duncan out in public? Let me answer that. I think Jan doesn't call me out in public because Jan assumes if I've said something that might appear to the accident group or some others dodgy, out of line, racist, there could be a good reason for it. And it could be that someone like Janey has misread it. It wouldn't be surprising that a racist like Janey, an anti-Semite like Janey, would misread something. And I think we've got an example here because Janey's hobby horse at the moment is to keep saying that my comment that I made about her son, not about me, it was about her son, Gobshite Junior, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on his trip to Rio in Brazil. I commented on something he did, and yes, I put the words poor black bint in what I said, not because I was looking at a certain individual as a poor black bint, because I said that her son would have looked upon that person in that way. Let's go to the exact quote, shall we? Again, context is everything. Context is everything. And this is Janey's whiny complaint. Remember, her defense is she was racist to Jan because Duncan was racist to someone else. It's not a great defense, but here we go. This is what I wrote. Again, the scenario is Gobshite Junior has gone to Brazil, and he's done what I think is the worst type of tourism. He's paid a local guide to take him and his mate, his pal, off to the sausage party. No, that's a separate video. His pal up to the favelas. Now, the favelas are the slums of Rio. And the reason I think this is the worst tourism is effectively it encourages, by paying someone to take you around this area, encourages even more favelas. The favelas just aren't a poverty-stricken area. They're also areas of rampant narco dealing, no-go areas, a lot of corruption going on, police taking payments. So had Gobshite Junior actually done his homework before stumbling around with his cocktail and his matey saying, hey, let's have a look at the favelas. This is the real in tourism, isn't it? We get to gawp at the poor of the world and take photos. And yeah, that'll be cool. That'll be good on Instagram. Here's me in the slums of Rio. And then it's back to the hotel for a slap up 3-course meal. I think it's disgusting tourism. I've really hated it from day one. I think it is very destructive. It's very negative. And I wanted to make a comment on it. And in the post, Janey had shown that her boy had, I think, given a Glasgow Celtic football shirt to his favela guide. That's fine. But I wanted to point out that is not a good thing, because as soon as you start giving things for people that are basically promoting these slums and this horrible lifestyle, you're on the wrong track. And I wanted to hint that maybe that guide wasn't the only person that got a Celtic shirt. Maybe some poor black bint, and they are. Here's a statement of fact for you, Janey. The people that live in the favelas are almost exclusively black. They are poor, and bint, meaning, in my vocabulary, a woman of lower morals, or not very high class. Maybe she ended up walking around in a Celtic shirt because of what your son had done. Hey, honey, wouldn't you like a Celtic shirt from Glasgow? Does that make you feel good? Now you'll be the only one in the slums with a football shirt from Scotland? I think it's just despicable. So that's what I said. I said, next time I'm in Rio, if I notice some poor black bint walking around in a Celtic shirt, I'll know who took advantage of Travel Girls Brazil, right? And that is me saying, I can imagine that Gobshite Junior is the type to have picked out a poor black bint. I'm not referring to a particular person here. I'm just saying, in his mind, that's the kind of person that would benefit from having a Celtic shirt. Look how generous I am. And that's what I commented. Now, if, for example, Janey thinks that is a racist statement from me, that from the heart, my intent there was, I don't know, what was my intent there? To make sure the whole world knew that the people in the slums of Rio are poor and black and bints? Absolutely not. My intent there was to show how the vocabulary in the mind of some absolute shitty tourist like Gobshite Junior would be thinking. That's what he would be thinking. Those are the vocabulary words that would pop into his head, because I think he is the reprobate type of tourist that loves to do that kind of thing. Waltz around with all his Western wealth and pleasure, taking photos aplenty of how the poor live, handing out a Celtic shirt. Yeah, here you go, poor black bint. Wouldn't you like this? Yeah, now I feel good about myself. As my mummy always said, a little bit of virtue signaling goes a long, long way. And boy, do I feel good. Right, let's go back for our 3-course meal in the 4-star hotel. That was my take. Now, if you don't like that and you think that reveals that I am some kind of racist, fine, that's your take. But if you don't know the background, you don't know the context, you don't know how mine works, you don't know how my heart works, you can't be sure and you shouldn't be sure. And I, in this situation, tend to give the benefit of the doubt. Where I don't give the benefit of the doubt is when it's those extreme cases. The N-word, the monkey trope, the you're white, so you're okay, you're black, so you're not okay. When it is those extreme cases where the intent is made bloody obvious, I don't give the benefit of the doubt. And that's why I called out anti-Semitic and racist Smelliott immediately and successfully, because it's now been removed, and I will continue to do so. I will also, if there's no video on Monday, it's also because I am following up, of course, and will be sending all of this logged to her place of work to say, this is the racist anti-Semitic person that is working for you. I will send the evidence, and it's up to them. If Glasgow's Autistic Society want to take action, that's fine. If they don't want to take action, that's fine. But then I'll probably follow up with a complaint about them as well as her. Yeah. I don't know. How does Ben Grace feel about this? It's all very well saying, look, here's a post from my black friend from 4 months ago. Yeah, he might be your friend, but I don't think you've done the same to Ben Grace as you did to Jan. I don't see the post where you say, hey, Ben, here's a gorilla. It looks like you. Ooh, 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 looking for bananas. I didn't see that. So maybe Ben Grace doesn't know just how racist and anti-Semitic you are, Janey. If he knew the truth, I don't think he'd be your friend. Let's leave it there. Hasta luego, adios, hasta la vista. See you next time.